Today's video is all about the difference between drawing and painting organic objects or subjects versus man-made objects or subjects. Understanding this made a huge difference in my own artistic journey when I was first getting started with drawing and painting. And I really wanted to create a video for you guys on this because I honestly don't see a lot of artists sharing helpful information online talk about this. And I know that when I was first getting started myself, understanding these things that I'm going to be sharing with you next really helped me clear up a lot of doubts, a lot of confusion that I had, and all of this really helped me up level my artwork. All right, so in this video, I'm first going to be explaining what exactly natural or organic objects or subjects are, what machine-made or man-made objects or subjects are. I'm going to be providing examples of each. Then I'm going to be explaining why it's so important that as artists we understand the difference between the two. And along the way, I'll be providing some key pieces of information and tips that are going to help you reach greater success whenever drawing or painting either of these. All right, so let's go ahead and jump straight in. Let's talk about organic or natural objects or subjects first. So these are objects that are present in nature. So think mountains, skies, rivers, water, rocks, flowers, trees, anything like that, even fruits or vegetables, okay? These kinds of objects are irregular, they are imperfect, and even though, yes, maybe apples are similar, peaches are similar, pears are similar, trees are similar, and they have similar characteristics, no two trees, no two apples, no two peaches, no two mountains are exactly the same. They have a lot of irregularity all throughout them, a lot of imperfection. Usually there is asymmetry present, meaning that if you cut them exactly in half, the two halves are going to be different. They have plenty of flaws, plenty of imperfections, and they are harder to relate to simple geometric forms. So if you've been part of this community for any amount of time, then you're probably already well aware that everything around you can be related and visualized to a simple 3D form or a combination of simple 3D forms. Simple 3D forms are those forms that you learn about in math: spheres, cylinders, cubes, rectangular prisms, pyramids, cones. Those are simple 3D forms, right? And everything around you has mass and volume and is made up of planes. And as artists who, we are looking to create optical illusions on flat two-dimensional surfaces like paper or canvas, it's essential that we understand that everything around us is made up of planes. It has volume, it has mass. When we're getting started, this is what I always recommend. Train yourself to simplify everything around you and visualize what it is that you're trying to draw or paint as a simple 3D form or a combination of simple 3D forms. Organic or natural things or objects are more difficult to relate to a simple 3D form like a rectangular prism or a sphere or a cube or a cylinder, because there is so much irregularity throughout them. You compare a tree trunk to something like a simple flower vase or a coffee mug that is just a cylinder, well, you're gonna be able to visualize that simple vase of flowers or a coffee mug as a cylinder, whereas the tree trunk, it has a lot of irregular edges to it. Maybe it's crooked, that it has branches coming out. And so all of this irregularity and imperfection throughout it makes that tree trunk more difficult to visualize as a cylinder. It's more difficult to visualize the leaf portion of a tree as a sphere or a cone in the case of an evergreen tree. However, at a macro level, that's what it is. An evergreen tree has a cone form to it, but it's difficult to visualize because of all that irregularity present throughout the leaves. And so natural or organic objects or subjects, they have tons of irregularity present, and the planes are more difficult to make out. And because of all of this imperfection, irregularity, and asymmetry involved in organic objects or subjects, it's more difficult to relate them to simple 3D forms. However, they can and they should, because as artists, if we're looking to develop any sense of realism in our work, we need to see these as being structures that have mass and volume to them. And it's essential that we're able to simplify them and understand their structure at a macro level before bringing in all of that irregularity. Here's the thing though, when it comes to natural or organic objects or subjects, even though these may be more difficult to visualize as simple 3D forms so that then we can shade them in and create a believable illusion of mass and volume to them and light and shadow. What's cool is that there is a greater margin of error when you're drawing or painting something like a tree or a mountain or water or a flower. And what I mean by this is proportions can be off. Perspective doesn't have to be as precise as when you're drawing something like a machine or man-made object or subject. Let's just say that you are drawing or painting a pear or a pair of pears. If one of your pears is slightly wider or taller or rounder or a little bit more pointy at the top than the pear that you have in front of you in real life or the pear that you have in your reference photo, if you successfully draw its shape and it looks like it has believable 3D form and perspective, proportions and shapes can be slightly off and it's still going to look like a pear. If your apple is slightly wider than what you have in your reference, or that tree, the shape of the leaves are a little bit different, it's still going to look like a tree. If you have that macro structure in, if the perspective makes sense and the light and shadow is achieved, proportions can be off. Things don't have to be super accurate to transmit a higher level of realism. And there are no strict lines or angles. And so whenever I am adding in things like flowers or trees or mountains or bodies of water in a landscape or a scene, I have to make sure that I add these things in with high levels of irregularity to them. No two trees should be the same or should be equally distanced apart or should look like stamps, like one same tree. They have to be clustered together in different ways. I have to make sure that I'm bringing in irregularity in every sense of the word. Asymmetry, imperfection. Moving on to man-made or machine-made objects or subjects. So in this category, we're talking about things like houses, machines, cars, buildings, boxes, chairs, pieces of furniture, anything that has been man-made, mass-made in a machine. All right, so these are objects that they can be exactly the same because they have been made by a machine or a human being built them using things like precise measuring tools and just made to be perfect. Many of these objects do have symmetry to them, meaning that if you cut them or broke them exactly in half, the two halves would be exactly the same. However, of course, there are many modern houses and buildings in which these man-made structures have been intentionally designed to have asymmetry to them. However, even within this asymmetry, there is a lot of perfection and there are a lot of flat planes or sides. Planes is simply another word for sides. But because these types of objects or subjects have so many flat sides to them and specific angles and all of this, you can more easily identify them and visualize them as simple 3D geometric forms such as cubes, rectangular prisms, and even cylinders and spheres. Because of these characteristics, when it comes to man-made or machine-made objects or subjects, there is less of a margin of error because there are flat planes, there are specific angles, and we have to know how to draw things like cubes, cylinders, rectangular prisms, etc., with believable 3D form and with believable perspective. Even though these can be more easily identifiable as simple 3D forms, we have to know how to draw things like cubes, rectangular prisms, cylinders, etc. from different angles and perspectives. And if that 3D form is off, if the angles, if the lines, if the perspective is off as well, then at the end, your drawing or your painting is not going to look believable. So when it comes to man-made or machine-made objects or subjects, they are more easily identifiable as simple 3D forms, but they are harder in that we need to know how to draw these simple 3D forms. And we need to understand perspective much more deeply. Throughout the years, as I've had the honor of helping so many different people, I've noticed that for some people, organic objects are easier, and for others, geometric objects are easier. So this totally depends on you and what comes easier and more naturally to you. But I promise you that it's just a matter of delving a little bit deeper into whatever one is challenging for you and practicing a little bit more. Now, if you're asking yourself, well, where do humans and animals fit into these categories? What if you like drawing or painting portraits or the human figure or animals? So when it comes to these types of subjects, I would definitely relate these more to more organic, natural subjects because of all the complexity and irregularity present. Of course, in a human body and even an animal's body, there is a sort of symmetry in terms of the left and right halves of our bodies if someone were to cut us in half. But there is imperfection within that symmetry. Our organs are not symmetrical inside of us. And, the left and right halves of our faces are slightly different. There are imperfections, but what is important to understand when it comes to drawing or painting anything anatomical, whether it's human or animal, is that you have to definitely delve deeper into anatomy, specific proportions, and all of this if you're looking for mid to higher levels of realism. So there is that challenge to those types of subjects. All right, so moving on to the next part of this video in which I'm going to be explaining why it's so important to be able to distinguish between these two types of objects or subjects and know the difference between them as artists. So as I mentioned before, for some people, organic natural subjects or objects are easier, and for others, machine-made, more perfect, man-made structures are going to be easier to draw or paint. And the reason why this is because these types of subjects, when we're drawing or painting them, they tug at different parts of our brains. And we're all different. We have different strengths and weaknesses. For some of us, things come more naturally or easily than for others. However, now that you know the differences between the two, you'll know what to look for and what questions to ask and what tools to bring in, what information you need to make use of to make the process smoother for you as you're drawing or painting, and this will help you arrive at greater success. For example, when I am drawing or painting something like a scene in which there are plenty of natural objects like trees, rocks, flowers, but there's also a cottage in the distance, or a bridge, a man-made bridge, or a car, well, I now know that I have to make that mental switch along the way when I am changing from drawing or painting one type of subject to painting the other type of subject, and this leads to greater success. This is also the case when I am drawing or painting a still life arrangement in which I have flowers and fruits and vegetables, but also vases and boxes and books. It's the same thing. I have to make that mental switch. And making that mental switch is important. Acknowledging that difference between these two types of subjects is important, because if I don't make that mental switch, oftentimes when I am adding in the trees or, painting the clouds or the rocks, at the end, they end up looking too stiff, too unnatural, too patterny. It doesn't look realistic. Whereas when I am painting the house or anything man-made, a car or a bridge, well, if it lacks that believable sense of 3D form and perspective, that can really throw off the piece as well. If the lines are way too wonky or I don't bring in this knowledge of 3D form and perspective. So I hope that the difference between organic and man-made objects or subjects is clear. I do want to mention, just to conclude, that even though there are nuances within each category that we have to make sure to have in mind in order to draw or paint these kinds of objects or subjects more effectively as artists. If you've checked out any of my drawing tutorials, you've probably heard me say that the way that I draw one thing is the way that I draw everything. So there are many things that are going to help you succeed with your drawing that you should bring in no matter what kind of object or subject it is that you are trying to draw. So for example, one of these things is working from general and making your way towards specifics. So larger general shapes first, then medium-sized shapes, then smaller shapes and details. This is going to help you arrive at better proportions no matter what kind of subject it is that you are drawing. And it's also going to help you utilize your drawing space a lot more effectively. Simplification is key. Another thing is always make sure that you are acknowledging that whatever it is that you're drawing or painting has mass, has volume, is a little three-dimensional structure. It's not flat. Train yourself to simplify whatever it is that you're drawing or painting and visualize it as simple shapes, simple forms. Even though it may have a lot of irregularity throughout it, try to tune that out and understand its macro level general structure before getting carried away by the micro details. And finally, another thing that I always recommend, no matter what it is that you're drawing or painting, is to start with a light drawing so that you can always correct mistakes and refine along the way. Remember, before starting with any new piece, observe that reference that you're going to be using, whether it's a reference photo, whatever it is that you have in front of you in real life. And even if you're drawing or painting from imagination, it's still worth asking yourself, what are the organic elements in this piece that I'm going to be drawing or painting? What are the man-made elements in this piece that I'm going to be drawing or painting? And what specific tools and resources do I need to draw them or paint them more successfully? And also along the way, remember to make that mental switch when you're going to be changing from one kind of subject to another. If you have any comments or questions, you can go ahead and leave them down below in the comment section of this post. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I wish you a wonderful rest of your weekend and talk to you soon.